That AFC North, huh? Now, there's no reason to believe the Baltimore Ravens won't win the division again. However, I do think that the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to be a lot better, but what happens to make them a lot better revolves around Ben Roethlisberger's health and him coming back. Obviously, the absence of a true leading quarterback last year hurt the Pittsburgh Steelers in more ways than one. The Cleveland Browns went into the season with some of you saying 12-4, 11-5. Well, maybe Baker Mayfield's good, but he's just not as good as you think he is. And the Cincinnati Bengals, well, they don't have much going for them, but the one thing they do have going for them is Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow should be very fun to watch, and especially if A.J. Green could stay on the field, the duo between them should be fun to watch as well. Ladies and gentlemen, you know the rules and you know how it goes. This is your AFC North Division preview. We preview every single team, divisions, or every single position. Hit the like button, subscribe, go nowhere else. It's time to talk about that AFC North, and you know that here we do it better than pretty much anywhere else because first off, we're Nick's World, and second off, you're listening. This is going to be the AFC North complete preview and prediction. Basically, what happens in this video is we go over exactly like we did with the AFC East. If you missed that one as well, that is also on the channel. That was the last upload. We go over in this video, we go through every single position on all four of these teams. We do division by division. We talk about the strengths, the weaknesses, and what exactly we can expect going forward in 2020. NFL actually did something yesterday where tomorrow is the last day where an NFL player can opt out of the season. I still feel like there will be players that will opt out midway through the season if they test positive or there's a surge or a spike in the NFL season. The MLB also as well has reported that there are no more positive tests and that they reportedly, hopefully, have contained the virus that has somewhat hit the MLB or the Marlins. It jump-started the activities. The NBA reported no positive tests today for the coronavirus, which is another good sign of news. But without further ado, let's talk about the AFC North. Now, the first team you got to talk about is the team that everyone should expect to win it, not just last year, but this year as well, and that's the Baltimore Ravens. The Baltimore Ravens are led behind the man, the myth, the legend himself, Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson is a self-explanatory quarterback. If you've been under a rock this last season, let's just tell you that he's become one of Michael Vick's, a synonym for Michael Vick, but perhaps even better. Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens were absolutely unstoppable throughout the 16 games that they played this entire season. Lamar Jackson was running like he was a running back, and he actually, I believe, if I'm correct, finished with 1,000+ yards on his feet. He also added a bunch of touchdowns, I believe 36, if I'm correct, not too many interceptions, and it resulted in 14 wins and only 2 losses for the Baltimore Ravens all season long. But one of the questions about Lamar Jackson has become, what can he do in the playoffs? Well, right now, Lamar Jackson is 0-2 in the playoffs. His very first playoff game was against, I don't know if they were San Diego or maybe LA at the time, the Chargers, and my goodness, it was one of the worst quarterback performances I've ever seen. His second playoff appearance was against the Titans this year. Now, on paper, Lamar Jackson wasn't absolutely terrible, but he wasn't used to seeing the dominance that we're used to seeing of him because my Titans, oh yes, my Titans pass rush hit Lamar Jackson every single which way from Sunday. He was getting sacked a lot, making a lot of ill-timed decisions through an interception or two, and the Titans ran all over them, literally. Now, Lamar Jackson is a good quarterback, but I think the Ravens need him to show that he can do the exact same things he did in the regular season in the playoffs. The very first game the Ravens played this year in the playoffs, they were at home. The Titans were young, they were hungry, they were upstart. We understood that. But Lamar Jackson didn't play terrible, but he didn't play great. He still had, I think, 360 yards, but he looked like a chicken with his head cut off. Now, I don't know how much credit you give to the Titans or how much poor effort you give to the Ravens. But Lamar Jackson, assuming that the Ravens would be my pick to win the division this year, we're going to hopefully see a much better version of Lamar Jackson, because if the Ravens have a somewhat of a similar season, I do not see them going 14-2 again. But let's say they were to go 12-4 or even 11-5, which, well, they'll probably go 12-4. Let's say 12-4. Lamar gets to that first playoff game and he repeats the same exact mistake. Then it's a matter of, this is a good quarterback, but how far can he really take us? Running back. We've talked about Lamar Jackson. We talked about how good he is on his feet. But let's even talk about the running backs he hands off to. The Ravens have one of the better running back duos in the NFL. Mark Ingram is a very good player. I think, honestly, he talks a little bit too much. At least it's not about himself. Mark Ingram and Gus Edwards were the duo last year. Ingram was injured late in the season. They also have Justice Hill, who will be a third back for the Baltimore Ravens in this upcoming season. But look for Mark Ingram to take the most of the workload in the run game for the Ravens. As far as receivers go, Marquise Brown, they're looking for another big year from him as a young wide receiver. And also Mark Andrews at tight end has become one of the best tight ends in football. Miles Boykin, also multiple rookies are coming back. And the Baltimore offense should have no shortage of highlights this year. The offensive line, they have a bunch of great tackles. They have Ronnie Stanley, Orlando Brown Jr. Unfortunately, Marshall Yanda did retire. But despite all that, they got good protection. They got a good run game. They have good quarterback, and they have good receivers. The Baltimore Ravens will be a fantasy highlight all season long, and I would expect Lamar to do maybe not everything he did last year, but a lot of what was similar this past season with the Baltimore Ravens. Now we're talking about defense. The defensive line, they needed to improve their run defense. That was very evident in the playoffs. So what did the Baltimore Ravens do? They signed Calais Campbell, who's one of the best pass rushers in the league. Derek Wolfe as well. Jihad Ward and Justin Willis come back on this defensive line. Now, the linebackers are a bit of a question because we don't know what we're getting. Yes, we have Matt Judon here and Jalen Ferguson, but we have a player that is of high praise drafted. The Ravens drafted Patrick Queen to be their linebacker this upcoming season, or one of their linebackers as well. It looked for some transition to go on and some question marks at the linebacker position for the Ravens this year, but for the most part, as of up to this point, the Ravens have a lot of strong suits. And then we get to the secondary. The importance of a good secondary in the NFL is little to none, and the Ravens host one of the best secondaries in the NFL. That is Marlon Humphrey and Marcus Peters. They also have Earl Thomas, but Earl Thomas is not getting any younger. Tavon Young as well, and Chuck Clark will be the safeties as well. They have two great corners in Marlon Humphrey and Marcus Peters. Earl Thomas, again, he's getting up there in age. It's one of those things, what are we going to get from Earl Thomas? Of course, he's not going to represent the player that he did in his Seattle days, but for the most part, this team's defense, linebackers a little bit of a question. Their pass rush should be better. Their offense is going to be great, and their secondary is one of the league's best, so there are not too many weaknesses on this Baltimore Ravens team as well. And then, of course, we talk about special teams. That is Justin Tucker, who is one of the best kickers in the league. So look for the Baltimore Ravens to put up a crap ton of points this year in the NFL. Now we're going to talk about the team that will probably be right behind them, and that is the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, here's the thing with the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Pittsburgh Steelers are coming off of a season where their quarterback, Ben Roethlisberger, got hurt very early in the season. And once he got hurt, the Steelers never really found their rhythm. They were rotating between two different quarterbacks, obviously Mason Rudolph being the better of the two, and Devlin Hodges as well. The wide receivers suffered. James Conner was not an outlet as well because he had a very injury-riddled season. The offensive line, we'll talk about different things here about the Pittsburgh Steelers, but one of the things is that really hurt them and developed into their struggles last year was the absence of Ben Roethlisberger. Now, obviously, Big Ben is coming back. We're told that he's coming back and that he said he feels great and his health is everything. It literally is everything. Ben Roethlisberger can give this offense that really struggled last year in the NFL a kick. What do I mean by kick? Ben Roethlisberger can give this offense that, if I'm correct from what I'm being told, this offense never scored 30 or more points at all this last season. And it's not because of a lack of talent, it's just because they had a lot of problems scoring. But what led to the Steelers still being relevant towards the end of the season and still having a potential shot at a wild card? That was how great their defense was. So first things first, Big Ben coming back is everything. We're going to hope Big Ben stays healthy. Without question, he will be the unbattled quarterback at the quarterback position. James Conner is coming off of a very injury-riddled season. He showed a lot of promise when he first came up as a running back for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Benny Snell will be the backup in the event that James Conner underperforms or he gets injured again. But James Conner seems like a player that's going to be injury-riddled for quite some time. As far as the receivers go, now without Ben Roethlisberger, this entire receiving core really struggled. Juju Smith-Schuster is obviously the top guy after the departure of Antonio Brown. The team drafted Chase Claypool. James Washington showed some potential late in the season, and Johnson did as a rookie. The team did sign Eric Ebron as a tight end because Vance McDonald was one of those players that was very, very underwhelming last season. And if you know anything about tight ends, Eric Ebron is coming from the Colts, and he's one of the better tight ends in the league. So I think that can really spark. Now, if Ben can stay healthy and these receivers can show out, I think that this Pittsburgh Steelers team will have no problem with scoring the football. Their offensive line boosts two other great players. That's Marquise Pouncey and DeCastro Villanova as well. Should be guarding Ben Roethlisberger. Their defensive line, now they did lost Hargrave, but he did return, or is expecting to return. Stephon Tuitt is good as well, and they also, of course, have the one and only Cameron Hayward. Linebackers, this is probably one of the stronger suits of the team. TJ Watt had a breakout season. along with Dupree, and they also drafted Alex Smith. This Pittsburgh Steelers pass rush is no joke. If you are a quarterback, you better hope you find your receiver quickly, because you will be looking at the lights if TJ Watt has anything to say about it. And their secondary as well. We have to talk about Minkah Fitzpatrick. The Miami Dolphins are probably biting their tongues because they regret trading Fitzpatrick. Minkah Fitzpatrick single-handedly was one of the key leaders in changing this defense, as well as they also signed Nelson, and they have Joe Hayden as well. It's going to be interesting to see how the secondary develops. This defense is fantastic. Is it perfect? No, but this defense is very, very good. And if we see anything similar to what we did last season, expect the Steelers to be a hard team to score on. Not only that, also expect, hopefully, for the offense to improve. If we see Ben Roethlisberger staying healthy, and we see the receivers break out, maybe we get a healthy season from the run game, don't think that these Steelers would have any problem challenging for a wild card late in the season. As far as I'm concerned, they will not get the division. Now, the Steelers could break out and have a great year, but I don't know. I think there's a couple of questions on the offensive side of the ball that lead me to believe that the Steelers are in one of those situations where they could have a good year, and I don't think 10 wins is unrealistic, but it all depends on what happens on the offensive side of the ball. And let's talk about a team that, well, if you know them then, you know them now. That's the Cleveland Browns. The Cleveland Browns have been a miserable football team for many, many, many years. And last year was the first situation where we're starting to see potentially some hope in Cleveland. And the last time Cleveland had any type of excitement was their appearance in the World Series, and of course LeBron James and Kyrie Irving getting the final win over the Golden State Warriors. Now, going into last season, the Browns were pitted. Some of these people were out of their mind. They said 11-5, which I don't think was out of your mind, because when you really looked at the team, they on paper are a very, very good team. There's no reason to believe why they couldn't be a good team. Here's the question mark, and it starts at the head of the helm, and that's the quarterback. Baker Mayfield is a huge question mark to me. There's no doubt that Baker Mayfield is a talented quarterback. One of the things with me is his consistency and how he performs under pressure. We get a Baker Mayfield that throws for 350 yards and 3 touchdowns, and the next week he throws for 4 picks and 150 yards. Baker Mayfield, to me, reminds me of a younger version of Kirk Cousins. Very inconsistent. The bigger the moment, the more they kind of fold. I think Baker Mayfield has the talent of a good quarterback, but I think it all has to come together. And I'm not blaming Baker Mayfield completely, because there were some other problems on the offense as well. But one of those problems was not the run game. It was a great year for Nick Chubb. Kareem Hunt backs him up. Now, Kareem Hunt was suspended for what I believe to be the first half of the season last year. He is coming back, but of course Nick Chubb, after the season that he put on in the run game for Cleveland last year, he will be undoubtedly be their go-to starter. Great year. Look for another great year from the run game. Now, the receivers, to me, is a huge question mark on this team. Despite a choppy year from Odell Beckham Jr., he still managed to cross 1,000 yards, but he wasn't a threat in the red zone. He wasn't having breakout plays. Some of it was nagging injuries. Landry, however, had a better season, but he even says that he wants an even better season. This duo of Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham Jr. is supposed to be one of the best duos in the league, but last year the Cleveland Browns had some problems, and I don't blame them all on I do not blame all their problems on Baker Mayfield. The receiving core, Odell Beckham Jr. needs to be consistent. When he was on the Giants, as long as he was on the field, he was literally a top 3 receiver in the league, and now, debatably, we're not even sure if Odell, performance-wise, is top 10. Skill-wise, of course. They also signed Austin Hooper from who I want to say the Falcons had Austin Hooper. Should be a good threat at tight end, so we need to see a lot from this. Their offensive line, though, is part of the problem as to why they struggled. The offensive line did not have a good year last year. The team did sign Jack Conklin from the Titans, Willis Jr. as well. Joel Bitonio and Shredder as well come back. They need a much better year from the offensive line. The defensive line. Now, I feel like when anybody thinks about Myles Garrett, all they think about is the Rudolph incident. I'll leave you to have your own opinion on that. But Myles Garrett recently just had a huge extension. There's no doubt about the talent of Myles Garrett. It's his behavior. He's one of those players where I feel like he loses control easily. He runs his mouth a lot, and he's great. But, they also signed Richardson as well. Linebackers, it's going to be a problem. There was a lot of injuries. Sion, Mack, and Wilson are their linebackers. And their secondary is also a question mark. Denzel Ward is a good corner, but he's a question at health. And they have Delpit at safety. The Cleveland Browns have too many question marks. They have a brand new coach coming in. I think their defense is riddled with a lot of injuries. There's some bright lights there on the defensive line. But I think linebackers and the secondary especially, the Cleveland Browns have some defensive problems they need to address. And before they do that, they need to make sure Baker Mayfield's consistent, they protect him, and their receivers perform how they should. There are way too many question marks going in for this Cleveland Brown team to even think about a playoff. Bengals exist. Now, the Bengals have potential to be a high-scoring team this year, and I'm going to break that down for you a couple of ways. The first off is the #1 pick of Joe Burrow. Now, I've never seen so much hype behind a quarterback in quite a while. He was going, what people say was the best quarterback in college football history, as Joe Burrow was drafted with the very first pick by the Cincinnati Bengals. There is so much promise and potential, and he's going to have some tools to work with. We're going to talk about them in a minute. But Joe Burrow is the quarterback. Andy Dalton was actually shipped to the Dallas Cowboys to be a backup this coming season, obviously behind Dak Prescott. Running game. Now, one of the rainbows on a rainy Sunday, or every Sunday, for the Cincinnati Bengals team was Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon was one of the better running backs in the league. He started off a little bit slow, but towards the second half of the season, Joe Mixon really showed out for the run game of the Cincinnati Bengals. Obviously, Giovanni Bernard is back there, but Joe Mixon has had no problem showing his worth to the Bengals and the run game. Now, the receivers look like this is one of the categories the Bengals have upgraded. A.J. Green on the field is one of the best receivers in football, but the problem is he can never stay on the field. He's very, very injury-riddled. But Joe Burrow would have a nice toy of A.J. Green to work with, pending that he's able to stay on the field. They also are going to need more from John Ross, who has a lot of speed, but they need more from him. And they have a solid tight end to Tyler Boyd. Their offensive line, they drafted Williams as a lineman and Andre Smith as well. That's going to have to improve. But this offense could be interesting to watch if everything comes together for the Cincinnati Bengals. The question is, does it? Their defensive line is one of what could be the decent spots for the Cincinnati Bengals this year. DJ Reader is signed. Geno Atkins, great at what he does, and Carlos Dunlap as well. A couple of questions and some losses at linebacker. The team lost Brown. They have Brate, and they also lost Nick Vigil on the linebacking core. And the secondary looks very young. They signed Trey Waynes. They have Von Bell at safety, and Darius Phillips was a player they signed as well. I don't personally see the Bengals making, well, the Bengals are going to have another tough year, but I think that those problems, some of the things they improved, I think their defensive line is going to be pretty good. As far as linebackers and secondary, that's another problem. And the offensive line needs to get a little bit better. This team's success, honestly, doesn't only revolve around Joe Burrow, but it revolves around some of their defense, which was terrible last year, and the health of A.J. Green. But I would not expect the Bengals to have that great of a year. But Joe Burrow should be fun to watch. And the only thing more fun to watch than Joe Burrow is me. Nick's World, 20 minutes or less, broke down the entire AFC North. I want to say thank you to everybody that continues to watch and support this. As always, we are working our way to 700 subscribers. As always, stay safe and continue to have a great day.